Good morning and happy Saturday, everybody. This is Joelle Simone Anthony, the Grave Woman. And, excuse me as I turn this up. I'm making this video in response to a couple of questions that I got this week. Surprisingly, mostly about hair and makeup. But it was kind of like a good thing that everything happened the way that it did today. Because I'm actually getting ready to go out. And I needed to do my hair and my makeup anyway, so I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of talk to you guys while I'm doing this. This isn't really a hair and makeup channel, so I'm not going to go into great detail about what I'm doing. I guess if you're interested in the hair and makeup part, just kind of pay attention. I will talk about some of the steps that I'm doing. I'm not a makeup artist. My makeup routine is very simple. My hair routine is very simple, but you guys asked, so, or some of you guys asked, so I am going to, I guess, do this to show you guys. If you see smoke coming up into the screen, it's because I'm burning some sage right now, and if you hear a rustling sound, it's because I have a candle burning in the background, and it sounds like a fireplace. That's what it's supposed to sound like. Also, this is a live video, and I have to be honest and say I'm really nervous because it's kind of like that feeling you get when you have to speak in front of a group of people, except for there's no one here, and there's, I don't know how many of you guys out there. I apologize in advance for my voice. I feel like I'm trying to catch a cold. You'll see me sipping on some water. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to get to know you guys a little bit better. If you're live and you have questions, go ahead and send those questions in. I'll do my best to respond as I go along. I will be looking away because, again, I am actually doing something else at the same time, but I figured this would be a good time to kind of let you guys know a little bit about me. I asked you guys to open up a lot about what you're experiencing as far as losing loved ones and, you know, your experience with death. And that's kind of an intimate, or it is a very intimate conversation, and I don't feel like it should be one-sided. I want you guys to get to know me as well. If you don't know, my name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am the Grave Woman, and what I'm dedicated to is stimulating an open and honest conversation about death and dying, while helping you to, you know, prepare yourself and your family financially, with other resources, and just have a conversation about death. We live in a world where death is going to happen to everybody. And let me stop right here and say I'm using some concealer to just put under my eyes. And I don't think I'm going to talk about what I'm doing as far as the makeup. I might put a picture of the stuff I use up. I don't know. But just kind of follow along as I go if you can. But we live in a world where death is eventually something that's going to happen to everyone. Everyone's going to experience death on some level. We're all going to die. If we are lucky and we get to live, you know, for any length of time, we'll know someone who passes away. We'll hear conversations about it. People are talking about death all the time. It's around us constantly. I went out and ran a few errands last night and earlier today, and I overheard about 3 or 4 conversations about death. A lot of people talking about things that have happened in the news recently, concerning the family, the lady that lost her family in Missouri on the duck boat, I believe. 9 members of her family passed away at once. And, I mean, what do you say? What do you do, you know, when something like that happens? And I think a lot of time we look at things like that as something that happens on the outside, instead of taking the perspective that, wow, it could have been me. It could have been someone that I know. It's like seeing things on the news. You really don't get the full impact of what a person or a family may be going through until it happens to you, or it, you know, if it ever happens to you. Let me turn the light on. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. But yeah, you really don't get the gist of what someone else could be going through until it happens to you. And I just think it's important that we as a society have a conversation about death prior to experiencing it. Like I said, I want you guys to also get to know a little bit about me. If you don't know, if you missed my introduction, my name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am a funeral director, licensed funeral director, and embalmer. I currently reside in Georgia, so that's where I hold my license. I am recently licensed. I got my license in February of this year, but I have worked in the funeral service industry on and off since 2010. I had my first funeral service job in a cemetery here in Georgia, one of the most beautiful cemeteries in my opinion, Crestlawn Memorial Park in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been around funeral service my entire life. I had an uncle who was a funeral director, my Uncle Mark. And I remember being a little kid and, him coming up to South Carolina, where I'm from Florida, and basically just bombarding him with questions. I've always been fascinated with, I don't want to say death, but the essence of death. Like, you could be here one minute and then you're gone the next. Where do you go? What happens to the body? And I'd always ask him these questions, and eventually it got to the point where when we would go visit him for like spring and summer break, he would take my sister and I with him to the funeral home, and we would watch him embalm, or he'd explain to us what happened to the different bodies, and it fascinated me. And another aspect that fascinated me was that this person was gone, and hearing what the families would have to say during the funerals or during some of the memorial services or burials, it would just, the impact that someone's life could have on those who are left behind, like, that fascinated me. The details. I remember being a little kid, and my great-grandma Edna died, and we went up to Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania, to go to her funeral. And I was just obsessed. Like, I wanted to know if she was sleeping, how did she get into the box bed? That's what I called it. Who did her hair? If she was asleep, how did she, why were we watching her sleeping? So that just absolutely fascinated me. And that fascination turned into me wanting to go to school to be a funeral director. Initially, when I moved to Georgia, I went to college for business administration and small business management. Prior to that, I had gone to hair school while I was in high school. I went to a technical high school, so I got my license in master barbering, which is a combination of cosmetology and barbering. And then I went to college for business administration and small business management, and from there, I entered the work field and worked various jobs, and finally got the job in the funeral service industry after graduating from college, and fell in love. And from there I went to mortuary school. I graduated from Gupton Jones here in Atlanta, Georgia, which in my opinion is the best funeral service and mortuary science establishment in the world. I had wonderful teachers. One instructor in particular is Miss Walinda Jill Ramalingam, who she's awesome. She's charismatic. She's just an awesome individual. And the thing that stuck out so much to me about her was seeing a young African American woman who was having such a profound impact on the funeral service industry and those who were entering the funeral service industry. So huge shout out to Miss Jill. Thank you so much, because I don't know if I've ever told you, but you've truly had such an impact, like, on my life. So once I graduated mortuary school, what happened? I actually graduated mortuary school on a Friday. And that Monday, I started work at in a completely different field, for a university here in Georgia. And I've been with that company for about going on 6 years. It'll be 6 years actually on the 27th of this month. And excuse me, I gotta kind of focus on this. All right, so it'll be 6 years on the 27th of this month. And while working this job, I also was doing my apprenticeship, which is a required hands-on training. I think it was 3,200 hours that I had to complete. So while working a full-time job, at times working an additional part-time job, I was also working on my apprenticeship. And there are 2 exams that one must pass in order to be considered a licensed funeral director in the United States, in most states in the United States. And that is the National Conference Funeral Directors. I don't know the exact name, but long story short, I took and failed that exam 3 times over a 5-year period. And I passed that exam this year. So I graduated in 2012 and did not pass that exam until 2018. And once I passed that exam, the arts portion of that exam, there are 2 parts, the arts and the science. Once I passed that exam, I was able to submit my application to the state and become a licensed funeral director. During that time, worked for both privately owned and corporate owned funeral homes, which are completely different worlds. I'm going to do a video about that sometime in the near future, but just know, privately owned funeral homes, the mom and pop funeral homes in your small country towns, or that aren't associated with a corporation, completely different than those that are associated with a corporation. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just completely different. And I think it's important that people do know the difference between the 2. So I am going to do a video addressing those in the near future. But that is the history of, or some of the history of, how I got started in the funeral service industry. And I can honestly say that I've loved every minute of it. It's been a long journey thus far, but I am not really someone who is drawn to funeral service as it is practiced traditionally in the United States. I am more interested in what I call alternative and non-traditional funeral service. And without going into too much detail about what that means, is I'm the kind of funeral director that does not want to only offer your common embalming, burial, and your embalming, funeralization, and burial. There are a lot of companies out there that offer alternatives, and that's another thing that I'm going to be exploring on my YouTube channel, is what those alternatives are and how you can gain access to them. That is my passion. Everybody's so different, and I think funeral directors are one of the few people who get to know, or few groups of people that get to know individuals from a completely different perspective, because our job is to capture the essence of that individual's life while creating an event that represents that individual, while honoring their legacy and also honoring the life that they lived. And that's such an honor. Like, it's an honor. And I don't think there's anything wrong with traditional funeral service. It's just not it's not the only thing out there. And I think particularly in the African American community, we're not aware of some of those options. So I feel as if my purpose is to give access to those options to everyone. Excuse me for a second. I'm going to be a little quiet because I have to focus on this part. But it's not the only thing out there. And there's so many creative ways that you can honor, celebrate, and even, you know, creatively express love and appreciation for that person in the way that you handle their remains. And that is my goal, to share those things with you guys. There's so many exciting things happening in the next few months with the Grave Woman that I can't really talk about right now for various reasons. But September is going to be a huge month. So if you haven't already, please go to YouTube, type in the Grave Woman, and you'll see my face in a video. Subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram. I also have my own website, which is www.thegravewoman.com, and I'd appreciate it if you guys would check that out. I have several blogs, and there'll be other information coming to that platform as well. But I was hoping that I might have a viewer or two today to kind of have a dialogue. Just kind of running out of things to say here, but that's alright. I'm gonna stay on until I've finished hair and makeup. I'm sorry I'm not going into detail about what I'm doing, but again, this is not a hair and makeup channel. This channel is dedicated to conversations about death and about dying and preparing for end of life care needs and preparing for death and funeral needs. So I want to kind of stay focused on that, but I figured this would be a great time to communicate while having that conversation. So something just popped in my mind. Yesterday, as I said, I work for a university here in Georgia. So yesterday, and for the past week actually, we've been hosting a group of Russian delegates from, I think it's Kazan, Russia, who were here visiting one of our doctors who specializes in neonatology, which is the care of premature babies, if I'm not mistaken. And I had the honor of attending the closing session that they did at the Emory Center for Ethics in the Department of Theology. And I overheard a very, 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 very interesting conversation. Basically, the conversation was about the viability of a newborn fetus or baby. There is a difference. In Russia, or in where they're from, viability is, I guess, you know, at what point, I'm trying to say this the right way, at what point should life be sustained? Like if you have a baby at 20 weeks versus having the baby at 26 weeks. Here we have the technology and the know-how and the experience to sustain that baby and hopefully get them to the point where they can have, you know, a normal life, and they can have, you know, they can be healthy. So those doctors were coming from Russia to learn from our doctors about how they've done this over the years. So it was a very interesting conversation, and part of the conversation was when do you have the end of life or end of care discussion with a family, and just hearing the doctor's perspectives and hearing how they make those decisions and what they consider. It was very interesting, and I did get some footage, and I think that I may share that footage with you all and kind of see if I maybe can get Ooh, no, that's too dark. If I can get maybe an interview with one of the doctors that was speaking yesterday, because I think that's a big conversation, and that I personally know someone who gave birth to twins back in December, and I believe they were born at 23 weeks, and thank God they're doing okay. But there are some families who had to have that conversation. It is a death-related conversation, so I think it would be pretty cool to have that conversation, maybe via interview or live with one of the doctors that was there yesterday. So I'm gonna get to working on that. But again, I see I have one viewer, Just Being Me Jean, that joined. If you have any questions about funeral service, or have any questions about any death related topics, that's why I'm online today. Like I said in the beginning, this is such an intimate conversation, and I think it's important that not only do I get to know you all, because a lot of you have sent me messages and emails, you know, and have expressed some really personal things. I want you guys to get to know me as well. So that's the whole purpose of this live today. And I also wanted to address the questions I received about hair and makeup. So you just watched me do my makeup. That's really all I do when I do makeup. I did forget one step, which is highlighter. Nothing fancy. But if you have any questions, Just Being Me Jean, feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer. And so the hair part, I do twist on my hair almost every night. So just take them out and then kind of manipulate it with my fingers, and that's all to it. But yeah, guys, I'm not gonna say I'm not a big talker, but it's kind of hard to kind of have a conversation with yourself, especially when you're live on the internet in front of a bunch of strangers. But let's see, what else is going on this week? Nothing much really. I'm just really kind of tired. Again, like I said, I think I'm coming down with a cold or something, sinuses or something, because I have a headache that will not go away. But other than that, everything's good on this end. A couple things that you guys may not know about me is that are that I am from a small town in South Carolina called Beaufort, South Carolina. So I'm a country girl. I was born in on a military base in England. So up until the age of 18, I actually had dual citizenship. I've never been back to England, but I eventually would like to go. I am the oldest of 2 children. I come from a wonderful family, extremely supportive family. If those of you who know me would probably describe me as a daddy's girl, which I think is a pretty accurate description. One of my favorite things to do is to go to the movies. It's so weird talking about yourself, like, or talking about myself. One of my favorite things to do is to go to the movies. Something that just popped up is that hair and makeup are like a really big part of funeral service. A lot of times people don't die in the most peaceful and serene ways. Sometimes there's a lot of trauma, especially to the face, and car accidents and other types of accidents. People have cancer that eat at, you know, their bone structures and at their flesh. So there is a part of funeral service called restorative arts, and there are people who are masters at restorative arts. It's a requirement for the curriculum that you have to go through in mortuary school, but there are people who can actually rebuild entire faces. There are people who can do makeup so well on the deceased that they look better in some cases deceased than they do alive. So the hair and makeup kind of doesn't have anything to do with what I talk about on this channel, but at the same time it is a big part of funeral service and mortuary science. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that part, also let me know, and I will be sure to address that a little bit more, because excuse me, that was one of the things that interested me in funeral service and mortuary science. It's like funeral service encompasses all aspects of my personality, from the cosmetology and barbering side that I told you about earlier, to the business side, to the people side, and most importantly, the helping people side. So as you can see, I'm pretty much done. This is pretty much what I do. I do not wear makeup every day, so if I do wear makeup, this is pretty much it. Again, my name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am the Grave Woman. If you have not already, please make sure you find me on YouTube. Visit my website, www.thegravewoman.com. It will give you links and access to all of my social media. If you are looking for me on social media and you haven't visited the website, you can find me at The Grave Woman. So this was like interesting. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I hope you guys have a great Saturday. Live life, love hard, and I'll talk to you next time.